Brooke gets a calendar invitation on a Tuesday morning. She's been with the company for 5 years. Senior data analyst, strong reviews every cycle, the kind of person whose calendar fills up because other teams keep pulling her in to fix things. The invitation is brief. HR is requesting a meeting at 2 o'clock. She already knows what 2 o'clock means. She's watched it happen to 3 colleagues in the past 8 months. She goes to the meeting, she signs the paperwork. She walks back to her desk, packs a small box, and is escorted out by 3 in the afternoon. That evening, she opens her laptop and sits with a question she can't quite form yet. She performed well. Her last review said so. She was not by any visible measure someone who should have been on that list. So why was she? Most employees assume layoffs follow performance. The weakest performers go first, the strongest survive, and the middle waits to see which direction the wind blows. That assumption feels intuitive, it feels fair, and for smaller, less structured cuts, it's occasionally even true. But in large-scale workforce reductions, the ones hitting hundreds or thousands of people inside a single quarter, the mechanism is almost never that simple. What's actually happening behind the closed-door meetings, the spreadsheets HR doesn't share, and the calibration sessions managers attend without telling their teams is a ranking process most employees have no idea exists. It has a structure, it has weighted criteria, and it was almost certainly running in the background of Brooke's company long before that Tuesday email landed in her inbox. The most widely used version of this system is called stack ranking. The concept is straightforward. Every employee gets evaluated relative to every other employee, not just against an objective standard, but against each other. A forced distribution gets applied. Maybe the top 15% are labeled high performers. The broad middle is designated adequate, and the bottom 10 or 15%, regardless of whether their actual output has declined, gets flagged for reduction. Jack Welch popularized this model at General Electric decades ago under a framework he called the vitality curve. The logic was that continuously culling the bottom tier kept the organization sharp. The problem is that the bottom tier isn't always low performers. Sometimes it's just whoever scored lowest in a comparison that week. Amazon has used a version of this process for years through what it calls the organization level review. Managers bring evidence of their report's performance into a room and debate rankings together, assigning names to positions in a matrix displayed on a shared screen. The process is designed to feel collaborative. Multiple managers weigh in on the same employee. Disagreements get aired. But the structure underneath it hasn't changed. Someone still has to fill the bottom box. When Amazon conducted layoffs in early 2026, the cuts were framed around reducing management layers and reallocating toward priority areas. The ranking infrastructure doing the actual sorting was not mentioned in the announcement. It rarely is. Amazon disclosed more than 30,000 layoffs across 2025 and 2026 combined. That number doesn't happen without a system deciding who fills those slots. Microsoft's version of this history is instructive in a different way. From the 90s through 2013, Microsoft ran a stack ranking system that employees knew about informally, but that wasn't officially acknowledged until years in. The company's so-called vitality curve determined bonuses, raises, and exits. A widely read 2012 article connected the ranking system to what critics described as a lost decade of stagnation inside the company. Microsoft publicly eliminated stack ranking in 2014. Then, in 2023, managers were quietly given a new tool called impact designators, a field requiring them to rate the performance impact of every report without disclosing those ratings to the employees themselves. The mechanism had returned. By 2026, Microsoft ranked third globally in disclosed layoffs, with more than 15,000 cuts across 2 years. Here's what makes these systems so difficult to defend against. They don't announce themselves. There is no meeting where a manager says, your position in the ranking has moved, and here's what that means for your job security. That conversation doesn't happen. Not because managers are deliberately concealing the system, but because most managers are participants inside it, rather than architects of it. They receive guidance, they fill out forms, they attend calibration sessions where they're told a certain percentage of their team must land in each category. They're working within a structure the same way Brooke's manager was working within a structure when she submitted a positive review 6 weeks before Brooke's name ended up on the reduction list. The review and the ranking are not always the same conversation. There's a second layer operating beneath the ranking itself. It's about which departments survive and which get cut wholesale, regardless of individual performance. Companies running layoffs in 2026 aren't simply trimming weak performers across every team uniformly. They're making strategic decisions about which functions align with where the business is going. Teams supporting AI integration, core product development, and security are largely being protected. Teams in recruiting, content, experimental initiatives, and legacy processes are being reduced or eliminated entirely. If Brooke's entire analytics function was being reorganized around an automated tool, her individual ranking inside the team became almost secondary. The department level decision had already set a ceiling on how many people would remain. Her performance got her a good review. It didn't change that ceiling. The criteria feeding these systems are broader than most employees realize. Quantitative inputs include things like output volume, project completion rates, and cost relative to productivity. A senior employee earning a salary that reflects 5 years of raises while producing similar output to a junior hire 2 levels below them presents a very specific kind of calculation. Companies use what HR professionals sometimes call human capital ROI, a comparison of what an employee costs versus what they demonstrably contribute. In a cost reduction environment, that math gets done quickly and without narration. Qualitative inputs layer on top. Collaboration metrics, strategic alignment, perceived adaptability to new technology. Accenture cut 11,000 positions in 2025 specifically targeting NG employees who couldn't demonstrate reskilling toward AI capabilities. The criteria weren't hidden exactly, but they also weren't posted on the wall where employees could prepare against them. Brooke didn't know her company had been running a similar evaluation quietly for months. She didn't know her department had been categorized as lower priority during a strategic review that happened 2 levels above her manager. She didn't know her compa ratio, the technical measure of where her salary sat relative to the midpoint for her role, had been flagged as elevated. She knew her performance rating. She knew what she delivered. None of that information was wrong. It was simply incomplete. Whoever possessed the most comprehensive understanding of the underlying structure held the structural advantage in every one of these conversations. When layoffs are being planned, that entity was always the organization. The system was never designed to share its internal rankings with the people being ranked. What changes the outcome is the same thing that changes every other uneven information exchange. Closing the gap, not aggressively, not through confrontation, but through the systematic gathering of information that the company already has and that employees typically don't think to pursue until it's too late. What is the strategic priority of your department relative to where the company is investing? What is your cost relative to the output you're producing? And how does that compare to peers at different experience levels? Are you attached to a product or function with demonstrated long-term margin, or to one that has been flagged internally as a candidate for automation or consolidation? These questions don't have obvious public answers, but they have discoverable ones. Earnings calls describe strategic priorities. Job postings reveal where hiring is accelerating. Reorganization patterns, even announced ones, carry signals about which functions leadership is protecting. Brooke spends the first 3 weeks after her layoff doing what she didn't do during the 5 years before it. She maps the landscape of her actual market position. She talks to people who recently moved laterally into comparable roles. She researches which companies are actively building the kind of team she was part of versus which ones are reducing it. She looks at where AI is genuinely displacing analytical work and where it's expanding it by creating demand for people who can interpret and direct the tools. She builds a document that is not a resume, it's an intelligence file. Her actual market value, the strategic directions most likely to need her specific skill set, the kinds of companies where her position on a ranking system would start from a more favorable place. 3 months out, she's in conversations with two organizations. One of them runs a transparent performance framework with no forced distribution. The other is honest that it uses performance bands but gives employees explicit visibility into where they sit within them. Neither is a perfect system, but Brooke is no longer operating without information. She's sitting across from those conversations with a documented understanding of what she's worth, where she fits, and what questions to ask before accepting a structure she can't see. That's a different kind of negotiation than the one she had for 5 years at her previous company. The ranking system doesn't disappear because an individual employee figures it out. It's embedded in how large organizations manage cost at scale, and it's been deepening in sophistication as the tools for collecting and comparing employee data have improved. Invisible stack ranking, where employees are evaluated against each other without being told the process exists, is more common now than the transparent version. The systems will keep running. The calibration meetings will keep happening. The criteria will keep shifting as companies restructure around automation and strategic pivots they announce only after the decisions have already been made. What changes? The only thing that changes is what the employee knows when the calculation gets run. Brooke updates her intelligence file every few months now. Not because she expects another layoff immediately, but because she stopped assuming the system is telling her everything it knows.